Oh, welcome back. Good to see you again. We're getting close to the end of the course here for padding techniques. We're following up on what we did to get the adjustments of the connections and the corks and the felts. And now we're up to this page towards the end of this chapter. Here talking about how to install the corks on the kickers. So just to quickly review what we've done already, I can bring you down to the workbench. I've changed the angle a bit, and so now you're looking at the bench from the side and from up above, so maybe while I'm working you'll see more of what's going on instead of looking at the back of my hands. And I've turned off my radio, so I'm not going to have any copyright inflictions and problems with people and my audio. So I just have the last things to do now are to put corks on the kickers for all these keys on the main line. The C sharp key, the D and the E, and the A and the G. So that will finish up the work on the center joint, and there's 2 kicker corks to be done on the foot joint. So that you understand the problem that we head into here, we've adjusted all of these keys to go down and properly together. They're connected so that they work together. And all the pads are sealing. So that's the first part of everything. Now we have to put some cork in behind the kickers. This makes the keys stand open at a certain height. And we already got that right for the F key. When we put the felt underneath the back of the back connection, the bottom of the back connection, we put a piece of felt under there and measured the opening here at the F key to be exactly 125 thousandths. And now when we put cork underneath the E key, it's going to be too thick. And when it's too thick, it'll hold down the F sharp key too much. You see that? It'll catch it there. And then there's backlash at the F key because the cork is too thick. And so we'll carefully sand the back of this where we've glued on the cork until the backlash goes away at the F key. Then the same thing happens with the D key. We'll put on a piece of cork that's too thick, which causes backlash at the F key. And then the same thing when we do the A and B flat on the left hand section. We'll have to put a piece of cork behind the A key, which will hold the B flat key down too much. And when it does that, then we'll have backlash at the F key again. And so we'll sand the kicker on the back of the A key little by little and keep checking here at the F key to see when that backlash is gone. I've already done the work on the thumb key, and I've got that on off here to the side. I don't need that on the flute now. But the thumb key opened with felt on both ends of the B flat lever, and enough felt so that with the cork that we glued onto the back of this B flat kicker here, like this, we got the adjustment for thumb B flat to B flat to work perfectly. And eliminated any backlash at the F key. So that would be really the first thing that you'd have to do before you start these other kicker project process. So with that in mind, I've already gone across with each of these kickers and scraped the surface of the kickers with my scraper. And this is a tool that you would make if you come to the class. It's a triangular shape cross section, and it has two cutting edges. The top part is ground off, and all we do here is to remove any old shellac or glue or whatever they used the last time, like this, just to make sure we're down to bright and bare metal. Otherwise the shellac is not going to stick to the kicker. So you have to do that on every one of these kickers before you start trying to fit a cork to it. Now I've made some discs of cork from the bottle cork, and I'll pull you in so you can see. That's the wrong way. See what I do here to cut a piece of cork and make that fit to the underside of the E key. That's what the first one I'm going to do. Now you see how there's black lines, dark lines in the cork that go across here like that. We're going to cut a piece out of this cork disc that's going to be a little too thick. If I cut this in half, then I can make several of them. So that's what I'm going to start with there. That's my basic work. Alright, the first cut I make is the back, which would butt up against the rib, and cut that at an angle. Okay, so I made a cut that goes at an angle about like that. Then the second cut I'm going to make is a cut that approximates the shape of the tube, the diameter of the tube, which is like 3/4 of an inch. And to do that, I'm going to push it with the blade. I'm going to push it tight to my finger while I'm making this radiused curve on the bottom of the cork, like this. So you see how that's curved, and I can check that against the flute to see how it fits. And look at that. Not bad. Fits pretty well. So that's just an approximation. When we get done, we're going to sand that surface until there's no backlash at the F key, as I said. So now we're going to take the other side of this cork off, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to look down this way. I'm going to back you off a little. Other way. I'm going to hold this up so you can see. I'm going to look at the shape of this kicker here and see how thick this cork is going to need to be. Okay, if I hold this up here and hold it up like this and hold this down to where it's going to be when it's touching, I can get an idea of the shape that top of the cork has to be, and I'll just approximate that with my sharp razor blade. But this is the visual attempt to guess, approximate what this cork is going to look like when it's done. Now Haynes puts a nice flat surface on here. Other flute makers like Yamaha, for example, they'll make it curved, just like the curvature of the tube, because they're planning to put a piece of sheet felt on, or even sheet cork. That would work too. So that makes it simple for their patterns. When you have a complicated piece of work to do here, it just takes time and skill, and it looks easy, but it's not. It takes practice. So I'll probably have to do this a few times before I get it right. Alright, you can see that's approximately right. It's too thick, And it has something of a shape to match what is underneath that cork, that kicker. Just a little too long. I wish I could put this camera behind my eye optivisors, because it would make a lot more sense if you could see what I see. And do you see what I see? So the object is to get a piece of felt that's too thick, so we have backlash here at the F key. Now when that's glued on there, then I'll have to sand it until it's perfect. So we use shellac for these kickers, and we use what's called a soldering gun, which is just a heat producing method. There are probably 10 different ways of doing that, but I find the soldering gun to be very effective. It works quickly, gets the job done. It looks weird. I probably shouldn't have quoted that verse from Sound of Music. Do you see what I see? I get a copyright infringement. So I'm going to back up here so you can see how this works. I really need this pin, bench pin. You can see that. The end of this soldering gun has a V cut into it that fits the shape of the bevel on the back of the key here. And this is going to heat that key up really fast. It's going to drive off the alcohol, which is used to cut the shellac. And when all the alcohol is gone, it'll be bubbling and bubbling for a minute. And you can see the smoke is bubbling. Oh, that's probably good enough. Now I've got compressed air over here. Try not to kick the camera on the way by. So that's nice and shellacked on there. It fits pretty well. You can see that. And there's backlash at the F key. So now I'm going to trim the excess off, because there's way too much cork on here, and that takes a minute. I'm going to take it off the flute so I don't make any scratches and dings on the flute. I tried doing it carefully and not scratching, but it doesn't ever work. There we are. Okay. Now I want to cut that just a bit of an angle so it tapers. Point this so you can see what I'm doing. I want you to be able to see this clearly. That might not be in focus. Yeah, it's not in focus. Come on, guy. Focus. 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 Nope, it's not gonna work. I need a close-up lens for this camera. Okay. So I'll just trim it right off up to the edge of the key. And it's a little too long, so I'll cut it back. Don't want it interfering on the rib. Somewhere I've got a tool that I use to clean off that extra shellac, but I don't know where it is. Fingernail works okay. So now I'm going to hook up the springs again, and I'm going to show you how to sand the backside of this cork so that we don't have any backlash now at the F key, which is, you know, it's not too bad, but that's too much. Sandpaper is going to scratch, as I said before. It's going to scratch the tube. The back of the paper is abrasive enough that it does leave scratch marks, and we don't want to do that. So back down here at the place where I can hold this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use the key. To pull up on the sandpaper. So see, the sandpaper is on this side. It's on the top. Let me get you closer. So don't pull it out all the way every time. Just, you know, you would think you could do that. If you pull it out all the way every time, it's going to take all the cork off this end, and the less and less and less cork up to the back side. And we want to do an even job of sanding that cork so that it all comes down to the serrated radius. So just move it a little bit. Can you see that? I'm not taking it off. I'm not moving it much. I'm not pulling out all the way like that every time. I'm leaving it underneath here, and with this motion, every time I do that, I lift the key up and press the cork against the sandpaper while I'm wrapping it around the body on the tape. And after you do that a few times, check. How's the F key? Backlash. Still a backlash. Okay. Still too thick. This is 320 sandpaper. There's coarser sandpaper. I have like 150 or 220 or something like that. And that'll rip through that cork in no time. But it leaves a really jagged mess. And I don't want to have that sort of a finish on the bottom of the cork. Almost there. Getting there. So take your time and use this process so that the cork fits perfectly against the tube. You know, padders do an awful lot of work. That's just hours and hours of lavishing time on these things. And when the flute's all done, the place that the padder has spent the most time is invisible. It's underneath the pad cup. It's inside the pad cup, under the pad. All that work is invisible. And so I think that's why, for the most part, padders take a lot of pride and take a lot of care in how they leave their corks. If the corks look rough and shoddy and uneven and asymmetrical, that's not a sign of a good pad job. So when you're padding, be really careful. Be very selective about the cork, because you know, cork is just a where am I here? Okay, cork is just the bark of the cork tree, and most of them grow in Portugal. That black line there, that is an indication of the grain of the bark, and so we cut perpendicular across that line every time. So what we're using in this cork here is the end grain. The grain is going on back here. The grain of the cork is going this way, vertically against the tube. It's not going horizontally. If it was going this way, you would easily tear it off. It would break, and that would, you know, you'd have to start over. So that's why we do that. Start with your section of cork in that way, and it will come out looking really, really nice. Even, and try to avoid those dark lines if you can, but usually I don't bother. It's just part of the material that, yeah, you get used to it. It's okay. So there, no backlash. Maybe a little bit, a tiny bit, like 5/1000ths more. Nope. So obviously, if you've taken off too much, then there's going to be backlash at the E key. If you've sanded off too much, that's the E key is going to move before the F sharp moves. But if you have sanded, if it's still too thick, then you'll have backlash here, and you have to sand off some more. Okay. So the same process all the way up and down now. I'm not going to take a lot of your time or run-up time on uploading a video to do this over and over again. But so what you're going to do is the same thing. Cut a cork for the back of the D key next. And it's going to be too thick. It's going to hold the F sharp key down because it's too thick. And the timing is perfect. We've already done the adjustment, so whatever the F key, the D key is doing, the F sharp key is doing. So you're going to have backlash at the F key until you sand your thicker piece of cork off until it's perfect. You have no backlash at the D key. You have none at the F key. Then put the left-hand section on. You know, I don't have to show you this visually, but you can do this because it's the same process exactly. Put a cork under the A kicker back here, and when it's too thick, when the A kicker is too thick, it's the B flat key is going to be held down too much. And that's going to prevent the it's going to hold this whole thing down, and there's going to be backlash here at the F key until you get rid of that extra cork under the A key. Until when you get that done, it's perfect. There's no backlash here, and there's no backlash at the A key. So those 1, 2, 3 keys are all the same process. So you keep sanding the kicker cork, that's the new cork which was too thick, you keep sanding it until you have no backlash at the F key. Now the G key is a separate key, it's not part of this machine. It's just going to have a cork on the back here, the same kind of cork that you made for your leathers. And then you're going to sand it until when you look down the line this way, put this so you can see somehow. Okay, move out. So when the keys are all standing open, you're going to see the G key is too low because the cork, of course, is initially too thick. And then you're going to sand that cork. Come on, get under there. So you're going to look down the front of the keys like this, and you're going to see that this G key here is standing too low, like that. And as you sand it, it's going to come up a little higher, and it's when it matches the right hand keys and the A key and B flat, which you've already set. These are already done. I haven't done them yet, but you will do them. Then you can easily tell that the G key is to exactly the same opening, just looking down the line. Okay. Now, if it's an offset G key, then you have to use a measurement, but it's the same measurement. It's 125 thousandths with your micrometer, or if you're in the States, you can use 2/4, and 2/4 together have the same thickness as 1/8 of an inch, which is 125 thousandths. So that can be your gauge. Then you'll have to put the kicker on the C sharp key here. And the C sharp doesn't open to 125. That's too much for this key. C sharp is a sharp note. Pitch comes out too high on almost any flute, on every flute that I've ever seen. So what they do is they try to keep the pitch down by making this open up to 100 thousandths, or maybe 105 or something like that instead of 125. So you're going to cut a cork to go underneath this kicker here and fit so that it's too tight, because it's going to be too big. And as you sand it, just put a piece of tape there and use the sandpaper the way I showed you before, until this is opening to that 100 thousandths dimension. And play the flute and see how it works at that dimension. I doubt if it's going to be too flat, but if it is too flat, then just take a little more off. Alright, now we have 2 more to go. We have the B key, the low B, and that has a kicker there. And you're going to glue, I'm going to fabricate a cork that's too thick and glue it on there with shellac after you scrape the bottom of the kicker so it's clear down to bare metal. And most people want about 135 thousandths, maybe a little more on the B key. You could probably go to 140 or 45. And that's not interconnected with anything. And then there's another kicker. This is the last one on the C key. Uh-oh. Okay, I'll have to do this over again. Look at that. The spud was popped out of the cup. Look at that. How soft solder let go. Because this spud was too low, and tightening the screw down into the pad cup into this spud put a lot of tension on this spud, and just overnight it pulled it off, so maybe I can take a minute now and I won't do it now. I'll do it as a special gig when we do some special problems, because I have to reseat this pad and everything, reseat the foundation washer underneath here. They're called stabilizer. This is glued into the bottom of the pad cup, so I've got to take this out and glue it back in again. But anyway, you can resolder a spud with an alcohol lamp. If you want to try using the same solder again, that probably won't work as well as if you clean off all the old solder. Clean it off the spud, clean off the old solder with a burnisher from inside the cup. Get all the old solder off. Get right down to bare metal and solder this back again. And you have to have a small amount of flux that's used for soft soldering. Don't try to do this unless you have the right kind of tools. But soft solder flux is easy to find from jewelry suppliers. You can do that easily, but I know most people are afraid to use heat on a flute. But everything's got to be off the key. Then after you've done that, you've soldered this spud back on again. The top of the key is going to be a little bit yellowed or kind of straw color or even blackened from the flame. So you'll have to go back to the polishing wheel and polish the top of the cup so it's not going to be looking nasty after that. But anyway, that's just a little comment, a side comment on something that every pattern needs to know. And somehow, sometime, you're going to have to do that too. So I guess that's all I'm going to do for now. The time is short and it takes an awful long time to upload these onto the YouTube. That last hour-long demonstration I did took 24 hours. And actually after 24 hours it's still uploading. So I don't want to make really long videos anymore. It just takes way too long. So we're just about to the end of my course here. I'll pick this up again on another date, probably tomorrow or the next day, and we'll finish this then. Have a good day.